This is the Ford Everest Platinum, and it's a body-on-frame, off-road capable, family 7-seater that is also a good towing vehicle. And although there are some new rivals out there, like for example the Toyota Land Cruiser 250 series, I still think the Everest is still worth considering amongst its main rivals, and throughout the video I'm going to explain to you why. So first, I'm going to give you a full guide to the model range, talk about the options and other key rivals to consider, and from there we're going to talk about the design, the cabin, the technology, practicality, the powertrain, and I'm also going to take this out for a drive to finally end on a verdict. So before we start, please like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, but for now let's get straight into the review. In Australia, the Everest is priced from $54,000 before on-road costs. There are 5 model variants to choose from, along with 2 engine choices, and the variant I'm featuring in today's review is the top spec Platinum, which is priced from $81,000 before on-road costs, and for options you have 5 external colours to pick from, and in addition to that there are also free packages. I'd also like to thank Harrigan Ford for allowing me to film their demonstrator for this review. They are located in the Southern Highlands and they have a professional sales team, and you can find their details in the description below. Now, in terms of rivals, the Everest is the type of vehicle that competes with the Isuzu MU-X and of course the Toyota Land Cruiser 250 series Prado. Okay, let's now move on to the styling. So the external colour of this example is finished off in Arctic White, which is a no-cost option, and I think it suits the car very well. Now, in terms of the overall styling, you get Ford's C-clamp headlight design, like what you get on the Ranger and F-150. But of course, this being the Platinum version, you get Ford's Matrix LED system, so full auto LED headlights, LED DRLs and LED fog lights. There's also Platinum badging on the bonnet, chrome across that open radiator grille, and for off-road driving, 2 rated recovery points, and as well as steel underbody protection for the engine sump. And now coming to the side, so the Platinum sits on 21-inch low-profile alloy wheels that are wrapped in highway terrain tyres, but for off-road driving they're not very good, so you can option for all-terrain tyres and smaller wheels. Now, in addition to other key features, we've got plastic side steps on the lower section, Platinum badging and V6 badging, and as well as some air cooling across to the side. Looking at the wing mirrors, your 360-degree camera system, there's also front and rear disc brakes, and moving up the top, brushed aluminium roof racks, and from what we can see, this has been optioned with a black roof, which is free of charge, and I think it does set the two-tone appearance apart very well. And now looking at the rear design, so at the back, partial LED lighting, there's also privacy glass across the third quarter, Platinum badging in the centre, and as well as a full-size spare tyre underneath the car. It's also worth noting that unlike the Ranger with its leaf spring suspension at the rear, you have a proper spring setup at the back. And for towing, you can equip this with what is called the Touring Package, which includes a tow bar, an integrated trailer brake controller inside the cabin, and other additional towing features, as the Everest does have a brake towing capacity of 3,500 kilograms and an unbraked towing capacity of 750 kilograms. Let's now move on to the cabin. So before you climb inside, the Everest comes with a remote key, keyless entry, push button start for the ignition, and if we start off with the presentation, inside it looks very much the same like every other Everest or Ranger model, but this of course being the Platinum version, you get accented leather across the dash and along the doors. There's also a panoramic glass sunroof above me, and as well as this wood grain effect with ambient lighting, which I think looks very nice. So overall, it definitely feels a bit more premium in here compared to the rest of the range. And if we now move on to build quality, the door slam feels fairly solid. Up the top here is nice and soft, and even where you rest your elbow, you also get soft padding up the top here and across the dash as well. Soft padding on the glove box, and as well as a leather wrapped steering wheel that feels very nice to grip onto. However, when you start to look lower down, it does start to get a bit durable, even on the lower section of the doors. But in terms of quality, it feels just as good as a 250 series Prado. Next, if we now move on to comfort, the seats are finished off in accented leather, and as you can see, they've got this diamond quilted effect. They both also include electric adjustment with lumbar support, seat heating and ventilation. The steering wheel can also be heated as well, and it offers both manual tilt and reach adjustment. And finally, dual zone climate control with physical dials and buttons. And if we now move on to tech, it all runs off this 12.3-inch touchscreen, and overall it's pretty easy to work out. This is your main menu. your settings, camera functions, smartphone mirroring, and of course a dedicated screen for the climate control. And in terms of key features, if I go into media, this has AM, FM, DAB digital radio, a 12-speaker B&O sound system, USB, Bluetooth, and as well as smartphone mirroring with both wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. There is also inbuilt satellite navigation with 3D mapping, voice recognition with the ability to connect to Siri. And if I go into this menu here, this is your sketchpad to draw things on the go. And next, if I go into zone lighting, this will project LED lighting around the car at night. And there is also a dedicated towing menu, so you can connect your trailer and perform a trailer light check. And if you go for the touring package, you get additional functions for your towing and of course an integrated trailer brake controller over by this section here. And as you can see up the top here, an inbuilt modem. And you've also got the ability to connect this car to a smartphone app to access remote functionality. Next, if we now move on to safety, this comes with a 360-degree camera where you can cycle through different views around the car to your preference. There are also front and rear parking sensors, a rear cross traffic alert, an auto dimming rear vision mirror up the top here, and along with autonomous emergency braking behind this black box here. And moving on to other safety items, there's blind spot monitoring on the wing mirrors, a lane keeping assistant with active lane centering, which means the Everest does have the ability to steer itself within its lane. There is also adaptive cruise control that keeps you within distance between your vehicle and the vehicle in front, and finally speed sign recognition on the bottom corner of the display. It's also worth pointing out that the Platinum gets a bigger 12.3-inch screen in the center, and there are many different ways to configure the middle section, and you can also customize it to your preference as well. And when you cycle through the different drive modes, graphics appear, which is pretty cool. So for on-road driving, you've got normal, eco, and tow. And for off-road driving, slippery, mud, and sand. And that automatically sets up the 4-drive system to what the car thinks it should be in. Next, if we now move on to off-road controls, for on-road driving, you've got 2 high and 4A, and for off-road driving, 4-wheel drive high and low range. And if I push this button here, this will take you into a dedicated off-road menu. So you've got a front view camera with active guidelines. You can also cycle between tyre pressures, pitch and roll, and parking sensors. And it's also the location where you are going to find the hill descent control and the button to engage the rear diff lock. And finally, moving on to storage. So there are 2 glove boxes over by the passenger side, along with 2 pop-out cup holders on either side of the dashboard. Your phone can live there or on the wireless phone charging pad. You've also got a USB-C and A port, 2 small cup holders in the center, and a decent sized center console in the middle with a 12-volt socket. And looking up the top here, a sunglasses holder, and finally, decent door bin storage for a big bottle of water. Let's now move on to the second row. So from what we can see, this front seat is set in my driving position, and I've got good knee room, toe room, and plenty of headroom. If I move over to the middle seat, again, good knee room, toe room, and headroom. Now, in addition to other key features, above me are directional air vents. There are map pockets behind the front row seats. The 2 outboard seats can be heated. You've also got a fan control dial, a USB-C and USB-A port, along with an AC power socket. There's also decent door bin storage that could also fit a bottle of water. And over here, a fold down armrest with 2 small cup holders. And it's also worth noting that the seats move forwards and backwards, and they also recline forwards and backwards. And finally, for child seats, the 2 outboard seats are ISOFIX compatible, and right behind me, there are 3 top tether points. Moving on to the third row seating. So as you can see, I've got plenty of knee room, toe room, and headroom. But if I move the seat all the way back, as you can see, it's pretty limited. And in terms of other key features, up the top here, we've got directional air vents, some coat hook hangers, tie-down hooks, a 12-volt socket, and some cup holders. But it is worth pointing out that these 2 outboard seats are not ISOFIX compatible. However, behind me, there are 2 top tether points. Right, let's now move on to boot space. So the Platinum version of the Everest comes with a power operated tailgate, which you can remotely access with the button inside the cabin or using the key. And from what we can see with the third row in place, there's 259 litres of boot capacity, which makes this space big enough for a couple of school bags, shopping bags. You've also got a 12-volt socket off to the side, tie-down points and a net on the right-hand side to keep loose items secure. There's also some underfloor storage, and that is also the location for the jack and spare toolkit. And exclusive to the Platinum, these seats fold down electronically, whereas the rest of the range come with manual operation. And once folded down, there's 898 litres of boot capacity, which makes this space big enough for a couple of suitcases. And finally, to fold down the second row seats, you go to the back seats, pull on the lever, and they fold down pretty much flat. Under the bonnet of the Platinum version of the Everest, you get Ford's 3-litre V6 turbo diesel engine that develops 184 kilowatts and 600 newton-meters of torque, and all this is paired to a 10-speed auto, a full-time selectable four-wheel drive system, instead of the part-time system like what you get on the bi-turbo versions of the Everest. And for ownership, Ford Australia offers a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty and up to 7 years of roadside assistance, and each service is every 12 months or 15,000 kilometres. And finally, for off-road specifications, that includes front ground clearance, wading depth, approach angles. All of that key data is on your screen now. And with all the specs out of the way, let's go for a drive. Okay, moving on to the driving impressions. So at the front, I've got great vision over the bonnet. There's also good side vision, decent sized wing mirrors, and rear visibility is also pretty good. Now, starting off with some of the driving aids, the only thing I find intrusive with all Ranger and Everest models is the lane centering system, which you can turn off with this button here. But aside from that, the 360 camera works really well. It's a pretty easy car to maneuver, as it does have a turning circle radius of 12.9 meters. So as you can see, maneuvering it around a tight street shouldn't be a problem. So for touring around Australia and towing a trailer, this is definitely the engine to go for. But for normal everyday driving, and if you just want to use the 7 seats with light off-road capability, I think the bi-turbo version would be fine as a family vehicle. In terms of the brakes, they're a bit spongy and soft but responsive at the same time. And in terms of ride refinement, as you can see with the camera footage, it soaks up the bumps really well. It's a lot more comfortable compared to the normal Ranger on which this is based on. You still get a ladder frame chassis, so there is a bit of body roll through the corners. This does feature an electronic steering setup, so it's nice and light but responsive at the same time, especially when you engage 4 high. So yes, that is a benefit with the V6 version. And for performance, if I put my foot down, there is a bit of wheel slip if you run it in two-wheel drive high range, but in four-wheel drive automatic, it's pretty much perfect. And whilst we're up to speed, as you can hear, there is barely any tyre roll because you do have highway terrain tyres, but I am getting a bit of wind noise, which is pretty typical for this shape of car. And fuel consumption, well, Ford claims that the Everest V6 can achieve 8.5 litres per 100. I'm currently seeing around 10 litres per 100, but this is a brand new vehicle with under 40 kilometres on the clock. But around 10 litres is what I got on a Ranger V6, and that does drop down to around 7 litres on the freeway. So how does this compare with the latest generation Prado, which I have driven? Well, with this V6 engine and the full-time four-wheel drive system, it's definitely a lot punchier. Both of them feel pretty similar when it comes to comfort. I prefer the seats in the Prado, but both of them do have wind noise coming into the cabin. The gearbox seems to be a bit busy because it is a 10-speed gearbox. It is seamless in terms of how it shifts gears, and of course the bi-turbo version will be a bit more efficient around town, but if you are using this for towing, like I mentioned, this is the engine to pick, and it's just a bit more punchier for freeway driving. So what is my final verdict on the Ford Everest? Well, compared with the latest 250 series Prado, the Everest V6 is more punchy, more practical, and I think overall in most areas, it stacks up to be better value. And it's also more off-road capable thanks to that full-time four-wheel drive system. And it's definitely the powertrain I would pick if I was doing a lot of touring driving around Australia, towing, caravanning, that sort of stuff. But for everyday driving, putting kids in the back seats, I think the 4-cylinder is fine for all occasions. But of course, let me know what you think of my verdict down in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon to stay up to date with my latest uploads. But for now, I will see you in the next film. Thanks for watching.